Hi everybody, this is Warren. Welcome to today's video. You can consider this one an add-on from the last video I did where we answered the question of do online piano lessons work? So in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the advantages and disadvantages of learning piano online. So the first set of advantages or categories, if you will, has to do with what's going on right now, which is the pandemic. In terms of being a safe way to learn, the safest way to learn, if you're cautious like I am, like I mentioned in the last video, I haven't had a single in-person lesson since almost a year ago. Well, it's the safest way to learn because there's 0% chance of you getting sick. Not only is there 0% chance of you getting sick, you don't have to follow any complicated protocols. Like if I had to open up my studio, there would be temperature checks, washing of the hands, face masks. And by the way, with the face mask, like I wouldn't even be able to see the person's, my students' facial expressions, which as a teacher, I do base my feedback on the reactions that I get, especially body language, to see if it's really making sense for them. Not only that, even if you did get a little sick with whatever you got sick with, okay, if you can still function, you're not too under the weather, technically you can keep the lesson going, because if you got sick with the thing, like you would have to quarantine and all that if it's in person. But online, if you're feeling okay, as a teacher, I don't see any problem with that. You can keep the lessons going. And also in terms of consistency, I also mentioned in the last video, I live in California. That means random shutdowns to businesses in the blink of an eye. Well, if you're online, you kind of know what to expect, because even if you went in person, there's no way of telling if that business is going to have to get shut down. So if you go to a place like a music studio, I've known places that do lessons like music studios, and they have to get shut down just like everyone else. And that type of randomness is really bad for your learning experience. Now, the next category we'll take a look at is ease and comfort. The most obvious one is that you can learn from the comfort of your own living room, from your own kitchen or whatever you have, wherever you have your keyboard set up. Also a very minimal device setup. Like you really only need one device, although I did say that you need two for the most optimal experience. But if you only have one, you're still good to go. You just flip on your device, enter the Zoom call, and that's it. Compared to the setup that I have, it's really nothing. You also don't have to commute. I remember when I was a kid, I didn't live in a small town, but I still had a hard time finding a good piano teacher. So my mom was driving me for about an hour every single week to and from the lesson. That's about 2 hours of driving every week. If online lessons were available back then, I think that would be an option that we would seriously consider. So even if you don't nearly commute as much as that, even 15 minutes could save up you a lot of time if you total that up for the entire year. And if you're the parent of a student, you don't have to deal with wait time either, because if you're coming to the lesson, it's a 30-minute wait period for the lesson to be over. If you have an hour, if your kid is doing an hour, that's like an hour of time you have to wait until they're done with their lesson. That's also another benefit. A lot of my students, even the younger ones, have become very independent with their lessons. Well, if you're a parent, that's a godsend for you, because you can be totally hands off. A lot of the parents, I don't even need to touch base with them at all, because the students really take charge of their own lessons. Even if they're young enough and you teach them how to set up the devices and the software properly, and of course if you trust your teacher, you don't really even have to be involved in the lesson. That means more time for you. Now, the last advantage in terms of comfort has to do with performances. Look, I know what it's like to have been in a piano recital. That's why I can put myself inside my piano students' shoes. Like, a recital is one of the most scariest things to do on the planet. But if you do it online, it's not as bad. You still get pretty nervous because it's still the same thing. Like you feel, the eyeballs on you and whatnot. But it's not nearly as scary as doing it like in a public venue with like 200 eyes on you at the same time. That's a pretty nerve-wracking experience. So even me speaking into this camera, you could take this for example. It's totally not natural for me still. I feel a little bit of nerves. But if I had to do this in front of a huge group of people, public speaking, there's no way I would want to deal with that. So This has been a really great way for me to get my message across, but also it could be a really great way for students to just do performances without being a nervous wreck. And also with Zoom, it's never been easier to set up group performances. So if we're talking about recitals, it takes a lot of planning, a lot of coordination, logistics, and getting all the schedule together, setting up the program. But with Zoom, you can just send an invite and you can have like 20 people playing for each other at the same time. So it's really easy to get performances set up. So the last area I want to take a look at is the learning experience itself. So in terms of ease and comfort, like when you're thinking about the comfort of your own living room, that can make you feel a lot safer. So if you feel safer, then you could probably have an easier time learning the skills necessary, because let's say if you were to come in person, well, if you're practicing a skill set that's completely brand new to you in front of an experienced expert, that's quite intimidating. So a lot of students, especially the newer ones that have started with me online, we can kind of bypass that a little bit. They're not as nervous as they would be in person, so we can focus more on learning, and a lot more playing gets done at the lessons. The way most people learn, especially kids too, we're mostly visual. That's probably one of our strongest modalities, and in fact, the online experience could be a better approach for you if you are really visual. And then I also mentioned that a lot of my students have become more proactive. Well, for you as well, just the nature of things being online, you're going to have to take more responsibility, more ownership of the learning experience, of the lessons on a week-to-week basis, and especially your practice. Well, if you do all those things, you're going to learn a lot faster. And also with Zoom, a really awesome option is to record all of your lessons. That's something that the instructor can do for you. And if you have the patience and time to go back and look at your lesson, that could be a real game changer for you, because one of the biggest skills that professionals have that other people don't is the ability to self-critique. So if you're able to see all the things that you did in the lesson, like in real live time, and see the things that you did well, the points for improvement, that's like 10xing your piano practice. That's like learning on steroids. And the last thing has to do with being able to access better teachers. I mentioned I had to commute an hour to find a good teacher. Well, if I just go online, if just a click of a button, the entire world is my oyster. I literally, if I wanted to, or if you wanted to as well, you could study with someone on the other side of the planet, And if you live in a small town, let's say you're only looking locally and only with people who teach in person. Well, if there's only one teacher, you kind of have to cross your fingers and pray that they're good at their job. The worst case scenario is if they're mediocre or below your expectations, then you're kind of stuck with them. And instead, you can actually go online where you have tons more options. Now, let's take a look at disadvantages. Well, we'll continue with the theme of learning. In terms of the learning experience, I said when you feel more comfortable, you could actually learn better. Well, funny enough, the opposite thing could actually be true. A lot of people can do better in a more productive atmosphere, let's say. So like if you're a professional, your work life probably has been disrupted a lot more working from home instead of the office, which could be kind of good in the long run. But if you think about the type of energy and atmosphere you get from working with a bunch of coworkers at an office, the same thing like watching a sports game instead of on the television but in person. Same thing with learning a martial arts, like going to an actual dojo instead of just doing it in front of a computer. It is a really different experience. So that type of atmosphere might be better for you. And the other thing that you totally can't replicate online is a live piano sound. Obviously, the sound quality is not going to be exactly the same. Although if you get a good pair of headphones, there's going to be a lot you can do to enhance the experience. But just the impact of hearing a live piano instrument in person, there's nothing that you can do to replicate that. And it's also been a slower pace for learning. I've also had to dial down my intensity a little bit, because that type of frenetic energy that I might have during the lesson is frenetic, but it's directed. It doesn't really translate too well online. So I've had to find myself really dialing things back, slowing things down, a lot of more verbal explanations, which is not always more efficient way to do things. Because if you're in person, it's just so much easier for me to correct physically and just demonstrate. While online, it's been a more difficult experience. Now, if you're the parent of a younger child, you want to listen up very carefully, because if they don't have the focus, it's probably not going to work out for you. In person, it's been a totally different experience. I've had very young kids start with me. It's a lot easier for me to deal with because I've been working with children for quite a while, so I know it resonates with them as much as being captivating for them, keeping the lessons entertaining and fun, joking around a lot. It's been kind of a struggle to do that online. I think it's just the fact that they can tell it's a screen and not a real person. Just the same amount of presence that I can convey in person, it doesn't resonate as well over the internet. I've had a hard time with it. It's been a little bit hit or miss. And if you notice that with your instructor online as a parent, you're gonna have to put in a lot of time, a lot of involvement, and it might be more than you're willing to do. Now, the last area we're going to take a look at is inconveniences and disruptions. And in terms of that, the biggest, most obvious place would be internet connection. So with a lot of people online these days, it's just all the bandwidth being sucked up by everybody, you're going to experience a lot of disruptions in that regard. The first major one, I have to say it happens quite rarely, but it has happened, is that the call can get dropped completely. There are ways around that. At the last second, I have to do maybe like a video phone call, switching to my data and waiting for the Wi-Fi to pop back on. I know it's not always convenient, but if you're going to go online, it's not going to be a perfect experience. More frequently, you're going to have to deal with a slow internet speed. That's a little bit more awkward. Again, it's something that you get used to, but just imagine that whatever I'm saying or what I'm trying to demonstrate in the lesson, it kind of gets to you a few seconds later, and then I'm watching you receive it a few seconds later, and then you do something that I can see, maybe say something to me, and it comes back to me a few seconds later. Then I think you can get the point. And also in terms of schedules and your work environment, let's say you're a parent who works from home. Let's say your office is set up right next to your kid's piano, and let's say you can't really move it anywhere. And if you have to work at the same time your kid is having his piano lesson or her piano lesson, obviously it's going to be distracting for both. And let's say what's even worse, this actually happened with one of the students that didn't work out last year, is if your kid is too young to do their lesson on their own and you need to be involved, if you work at the same time, that just means a canceled lesson. And the important thing for a kid starting out is consistency. And the very last thing we're going to take a look at is the impact this is going to have on your wallet. Up front, it might be more of a cost if you're looking to upgrade your equipment, because if you want the best experience possible, you have to upgrade to the best equipment available. And I'm even shooting this on my iPhone. Even an iPhone can kind of cost you an arm and a leg. So you think about if you have an older, outdated device, if you upgrade that, that's going to be a lot of costs up front. In addition to that, if you need a higher internet speed, you're also looking at a slightly, maybe, I hope slight, but it could be a drastically higher bill than you're used to. And I don't know what the right answer to that is. If you really want to go for it and money is no object, then go for it. But if you sit down and really think about, is it worth it for you? If you have everything online and you're on the internet a lot anyway, that might be a no-brainer. But if you don't do as much online and you're looking at a significantly higher bill up front and on a monthly basis just for a 30-minute lesson every week, that might not be a good return on your investment. Anyway, that was it for today's video. I really hope you guys got something out of that. I'd be curious to know what has been your experience, if any, with the online piano lessons, and have you learned something from today's video? If it's your first time here, hit the subscribe button. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, share this video. I'll see you guys next time, and happy practicing.